Now to President Obama, back at the White House today, tackling a busy agenda, including big decisions on how to confront the growing threat posed by the Islamic militant group known as ISIS. This morning, the president met with Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel to review military options against ISIS in Syria. The meeting came after ISIS tightened control of a key region in the Syria-Iraq border, capturing one of Syria's largest military bases on Sunday, after the execution of American journalist Jim Foley last week. President Obama warned that ISIS cannot be allowed to spread.
From governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread. There has to be a clear rejection of these kind of nihilistic ideologies. One thing we can all agree on is that a group like ISIL has no place in the 21st century.
But today, as President Obama considers policy options, we're also seeing the politics unfold, with Republicans in Congress once again pouncing on a serious international challenge to insult the commander-in-chief.
This is an administration which the kindest word I can use is feckless.
And the problem is the president, quite frankly, he says all these things and he never does them.
Candidly, Bob, I don't want to hear from the president how he's reacting to events like the Mosul Dam. What I want to hear from our commander-in-chief is that he has a strategy to finish ISIS off.
My concern is that the president's strategy of leading from behind and light footprint has failed.
And late today, Senator Lindsey Graham kept at it, saying, quote, the president is becoming derelict in his duties as commander-in-chief. The same GOP war hawks whose disastrous vision led the U.S. into the region in the first place are beating the drums again. But President Obama appears determined to look before he leaps back into a war. Joining me now are former Democratic Congressman Patrick Murphy, the first Iraq war vet elected to Congress, and MSNBC's Krystal Ball. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us,
Thanks, Reverend.
Congressman, how can any lawmaker say the president is becoming derelict in his duty for taking a cautious approach to bombing halfway around the world?
Right, Reverend, and most of these cases, the same folks that were the biggest cheerleaders for the Iraq War, which was a strategic blunder that cost over 4,400 Americans their lives. Reverend, what you see here is the war drums beating again. Let's be very clear. What the airstrikes that we did near Erbil in northern Iraq against ISIS was because we had Americans in imminent danger in that region at the consulate and military advisors. The Republicans are now making a major policy shift to say, look, they're one plane ticket away from hitting us here in America. We need to do more. We need to do more. It's those war drums. And, you know, of course, they don't want to talk about, you know, authorizing the president to act. They don't want to, you know, look at the War Powers Act. They don't want to give an authorization because, frankly, the authorization for use of military force was back in 2001 and 2002 was only against al-Qaeda, not against ISIS. So they don't want to debate that. They're not trying to get any responsibility. They just want to throw stones at President Obama.
Yeah.
What is your take on this derelict of duty, Krystal?
Well, I think Congressman Patrick Murphy is absolutely right. I mean, the bottom line is here, they love to throw stones, they love to criticize, but what is their solution? I've yet to hear that. And there's never any foresight of, okay, so let's say we go back in, let's say we bomb ISIS, let's say we go into Syria, which by bombing ISIS in Syria, we're indirectly partnering there with Bashar al-Assad, who, if we haven't forgotten, is also not such a great guy who we were just recently thinking of taking military action against. So what then? What happens then? You know, do we have a power structure in place in Iraq that's ready to actually take control and have a population that comes together and forms a unified Iraq? Do we have an alternative in Syria? What's going to happen there? So they're always quick to go for the military action, but there's no foresight of what's going to happen next. Yeah, I love Lindsey Graham's comments there, both the derelict of duty, but also saying that the president's policy of a light footprint has failed. How about the last policy of the heavy footprint? How has that worked out? Because that's what's created this whole vacuum to start with. It's not like our previous interventions in the Middle East have worked out so great for us.
You know, Congressman, GOP Senator Kelly Ayotte was asked whether Congress could come together on a policy on ISIS in Syria. Listen to her response.
I do think Congress can be brought together. First of all, it starts with presidential leadership. Absolutely, the Congress has to come together, and I think it starts with presidential leadership.
Do you think Republicans really want their fingerprints on this? I mean, wouldn't they just rather blame the president?
They rather blame the president, Reverend, and they do it time and time again. They did it with immigration. The Senate passed the immigration bill. The House didn't even vote on one. They did it on a transportation bill because they didn't vote on one, even though the Chamber of Commerce is for it and labor unions for it. That would be the biggest jobs bill we could do, an infrastructure bill. So time and time again, they continue to punt and they continue to blame the president. The senator from New Hampshire, Senator Ayotte, listen, she's saying we need presidential leadership. You know, they're all busting his chops for being on vacation for 2 weeks. Well, they've been on vacation for 5 weeks. Why aren't the Senate and the House back in Washington right now to tackle these issues, to debate these issues, and give the American people their ideas on how to solve these problems?
Well, it's not like they were getting much done when they weren't on vacation, Congressman. But in the meantime, Krystal, as the president considers action in Syria, the House GOP is still suing him for taking action on health care here at home. Today, they announced they've hired a law firm for $500 an hour, with legal costs running up to $350,000. I mean, is this going to be the GOP strategy through the late summer into the fall? More gridlock, more talk about lawsuits and impeachment?
It's the only thing that they've got. They don't agree. The party's split on things like immigration. They've got no plan there. Lord knows they've got no plan for getting our economy back on track and strong wage growth for folks who are struggling at the bottom of the economic ladder. They've got no ideas in those realms. So the only thing that they can come together around is their dislike for this president. Now, John Boehner thinks that he can throw a bone to the base with this lawsuit to quiet the talk of impeachment so he doesn't have to go down that road. At this point, I guess that's what counts for being moderate in the GOP, just suing the president rather than calling for his impeachment.
Murphy, you were in Congress, Congressman Murphy. Do you believe that they would sue?
Oh, they're going to sue, Reverend. They do this time and time again. And the problem with this is that it's wasting taxpayer dollars. The same exact people that are so upset about the national debt and the deficits have no problem with the war funding. They have no problem with these lawsuits that go nowhere. It's just like the Benghazi special investigation. It went nowhere. It was a falsity. There was no controversy. We had 4 Americans that were killed. It was a tragedy. But there was no cover-up. There was no special investigation. They're wasting taxpayer dollars time and time again for their pet projects, for things that they care about, which don't help the everyday American family. And that is why the American people are sick and tired of what's going on in Washington right now in the House of Representatives and the Senate, because the Republicans are just standing in the way.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Former Congressman Patrick Murphy and Krystal Ball, thank you both for your time tonight.
Thanks,
and
Rob.
be sure to catch Krystal on The Cycle weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern right here on MSNBC. Still to come, finding strength in pain. How Michael Brown's parents are fighting for justice despite their grief.